It's probably the biggest question we all have, right? What actually happens when we die? For pretty much all of human history, that's been a total mystery. But you know what? Neuroscience is finally starting to pull back the curtain. And what scientists are finding is, well, it's not what anyone expected. The brain doesn't just switch off. In fact, it does something absolutely extraordinary in those final minutes after the heart stops beating.
You've got to love this quote from neuroscientist Jimo Borgigan. She said, "To die is such an essential part of life, but we knew almost nothing about the dying brain." I mean, think about that. It's this universal experience, and yet scientifically, it was a total black box. And that gap in our knowledge, that's exactly what she decided to tackle.
So for decades, the medical textbook story was pretty simple, pretty clear. When your heart stops, the brain is starved of oxygen and goes silent within seconds. You'd hook someone up to an EEG, and the line would just go flat. It was a neat, tidy story that we're now finding out is completely and utterly wrong.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we're going to start with that old story of death. Then, we'll look at the surprising clue that just blew everything wide open. We'll dive into the first ever data from the dying human brain, understand this incredible final surge of activity, and finally, connect it all to those mysterious near-death experiences.
So, our whole journey into understanding the dying brain, it actually begins in a really unlikely place, a rat lab. It was right there that an accidental discovery would basically rewrite everything we thought we knew about the end of life.
Back in 2013, Dr. Borgigan was studying rat brains during cardiac arrest. She was just expecting to see all the brain activity fade out, go to black. But instead, about 30 seconds after their heart stopped, something totally wild happened. A massive, organized surge of brainwaves lit up her screen. The brain wasn't shutting down at all. It was lighting up like a Christmas tree. It was becoming hyperactive.
And listen, this wasn't just a tiny flicker of activity. It was a full-on electrical firestorm. The surge in what are called gamma waves, and these are the brain waves linked to things like high-level thought and consciousness, was 5 to 8 times stronger than when the rats were just normally awake and alive.
To put that in perspective, for a few brief moments, the dying brain was more organized and electrically powerful than it had ever been in its entire life. It's just incredible. And of course, this raised the biggest question of all. Does the same thing happen in us, in humans? Answering that question meant we had to go from the lab to the ICU. And, for all the obvious ethical and practical reasons, this is incredibly difficult to study. It would actually take another decade before we got the first real, clear answers from a dying human brain. The big breakthrough finally came from the EEG data of 4 patients who passed away while being monitored in the hospital. One of them, who we now know as patient 1, gave us this just unprecedented look into the dying brain. Scientists were literally recording what was happening in the very moments after life support was withdrawn. And what they found was absolutely stunning. It confirmed what they saw in the animal studies and gave us our first real, scientific glimpse into what happens inside our heads during those final minutes. So, in 2 of the patients, they saw it, an intense surge of gamma waves that went on for several minutes after their hearts had already stopped. But here's the crucial part. This activity wasn't just random noise. No, it was concentrated in a very specific part of the brain called the posterior cortical hot zone. This is a key hub for consciousness, for our dreams, for our memories. And in patient 1, this incredible surge of activity lasted for more than 6 minutes. So what on earth is causing this? Well, scientists have a name for it, a brain tsunami. Think of it like a city losing power. First, the main power station, your heart, shuts down. The city, your brain, runs on backup generators for maybe 20 seconds. Then they start to fail, and as they fail, neighborhood by neighborhood, the neurons start to collapse, and each one sends out one last massive power spike. That's what's happening.
The technical term for this wave of cellular collapse is spreading depolarization. And here's the amazing paradox. This wave of death is also, at the exact same time, a wave of intense life and electrical activation. As each neuron dies, it fires one last powerful electrical signal. And when you have billions of them firing together in a synchronized wave, that's what creates that massive gamma surge.
And it's not just an electrical storm either. As all these neurons collapse, they just flood the brain with a whole cocktail of chemicals, including a huge release of serotonin. This chemical blast activates the very same receptors in your brain that are targeted by psychedelic drugs. So, in its final moments, the brain is literally drenching itself in its own consciousness-altering compounds. So you've got this unbelievable electrical storm and this massive chemical flood all happening right in the seat of consciousness. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Could this be the biological basis for near-death experiences?
I mean, for centuries, people who have been resuscitated from cardiac arrest have reported these incredibly vivid experiences, feeling like they're outside their body, seeing a bright light, and that famous one, a panoramic life review. Well, science is now, for the first time, starting to offer a real biological explanation for how these profound experiences could happen.
And this is where the science and the stories just line up in this remarkable way. When someone says, "My life flashed before my eyes," scientists can now point to the data and say, we see hyperconnectivity between the brain's memory centers and the seat of consciousness. It's incredible. We now have a plausible physical mechanism for what was once considered purely spiritual or mystical.
And you know, these experiences aren't really all that rare. A major study found that nearly 1 in 5 cardiac arrest survivors reported having some kind of conscious experience while they were clinically dead. That's a huge number of people, and it's a phenomenon that really demands a scientific explanation.
So when you put all of this new evidence together, it's really forcing us to rethink our entire understanding of life, of consciousness, and of death itself. And the implications, well, they're pretty profound. The main takeaway is this: the old story of death is officially dead. The dying brain is not silent. For several minutes after the heart stops, it becomes this hub of organized, heightened, and chemically rich activity. It turns out death is far more alive than we ever believed.
Which all leads to this one incredible, almost unbelievable possibility. Is it possible that the end of life is actually the brain's most active and profound conscious moment? The science is starting to suggest it just might be.
What this research really tells us is that death isn't a moment. It's not a switch being flipped. It's a process. A complex biological process that we are only just beginning to understand. And somewhere in that process, it seems the brain does something it's been a whole lifetime preparing for. It lets go of everything, all at once.